7 sisters at the orphanage were about to be separated forever, when a lonely old carpenter made an offer. At the final hearing, tears flowed when the youngest daughter showed them what he had taught them. James Wilson's calloused hands shook as he read the letter again. The morning light filtered through the dusty windows of his workshop, illuminating the fresh sawdust that covered his workbench. The paper was already creased from being folded and unfolded multiple times since its arrival yesterday. Final notice of placement decision, he read aloud, his voice rough in the empty workshop. The 7 minor children must be placed in separate foster homes within 72 hours if no suitable adoption arrangement is confirmed. He set the letter down and grabbed his sanding block, attacking a piece of pine with more force than necessary. The routine motion didn't calm him like it usually did. Instead, his mind kept going back to 3 weeks ago, when he first met them at the community center. He'd been fixing a broken chair leg when he heard them. 7 distinct laughs, from deep chuckles to high-pitched giggles. The sound drew him to the recreation room, where 7 girls played a board game on the floor. Their social worker, Ms. Thompson, stood nearby, looking exhausted. "Mr. Wilson," she'd said, noticing him. "Done with the chair already?" "Almost." He'd watched the girls, noticing how the oldest kept checking on the others, how they moved as a unit even in play. "These the sisters you mentioned?" "Yes. The Santos sisters." Miss Thompson lowered her voice. "We're running out of time to place them together." A small figure had detached from the group then, the youngest, he'd learn later. Maya, 8 years old with bright eyes and tiny braids tied with yellow ribbons. She'd walked right up to him, staring at his sawdust-covered apron. "What's that smell?" she'd asked. "Pine wood," he'd answered, pulling a small carved horse from his pocket. He always kept a few simple toys for the children at the center. "Hey!" Maya had examined the wooden horse with careful fingers. "Did you make this?" "Sure did. Can you teach me?" The memory was interrupted by his phone ringing. James wiped his hands on his apron and answered it. "Mr. Wilson." Miss Thompson's voice came through. "We need your final answer by tomorrow morning. The judge won't wait any longer." James looked around his workshop. Tools lined the walls, projects in various stages of completion cluttered every surface. Through the window, he could see his modest 2-story house, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, worn but solid. "Like him. I'm just one old man," he said, "living on carpenter's pension." "You're also the only person in 6 months who's even considered taking all 7, Miss Thompson replied. "They need someone who understands what it means to build something lasting." After hanging up, James walked into his house. The silence hit him like it always did. Sarah had been gone 5 years now, but sometimes he still expected to hear her humming in the kitchen. He climbed the stairs slowly, his knee protesting each step. The spare bedrooms were full of boxes and old furniture. One had been Sarah's sewing room. The other, they'd once hoped would be a nursery. James stood in the doorway of the larger room, mentally measuring the space. 3 bunk beds would fit along the walls. The smaller room could hold another bed and maybe a desk. The girls would need dressers, nightstands, lamps. He could build those. The bathroom would need more storage. The kitchen table would need to be bigger. His phone rang again. This time it was the church. "James?" Pastor Mike's voice was concerned. "Helen told me about the sisters. Have you decided?" "I don't know, Mike. 7 kids? At my age." "You've got skills, James. A home. Love to give. Love doesn't pay bills. The congregation will help. We've already started collecting supplies." James sank into his armchair, the one he'd built for Sarah when her arthritis got bad. "What if I fail them? What if you don't try and no one else does?" The question followed James back to his workshop. He picked up Maya's wooden horse. She'd left it behind that first day, and he'd been adding details to it ever since. The menere was more defined now. The saddle had tiny patterns carved into it. He remembered how the other sisters had gathered around while he explained the carving process. Olivia, the oldest at 16, asking smart questions about wood types. Sophia and Emma, 15 and 14, already planning what they could make. Ava and Isabella, 12 and 11, arguing over who would get to use the tools first. Mia, 10, suggesting they could sell their creations. And Maya, standing close to his side, watching his hands move with complete fascination. The next morning, James arrived at the orphanage early. The building was quiet, most of the children still asleep. Ms. Thompson met him at the door, her face tense. The judge can see us at 9, she said. If you're sure. James handed her a folder. Inside were his financial statements, house deed, character references from the church, and a detailed plan for modifications to accommodate 7 growing girls. I'm sure, he said. They found the sisters in the common room, already dressed and waiting. They sat close together on a worn couch, Olivia in the middle with Maya on her lap. 7 pairs of eyes fixed on him. Girls, Ms. Thompson said. Mr. Wilson has something to tell you. James cleared his throat. The speech he prepared vanished from his mind. Instead, he pulled out the wooden horse and held it out to Maya. I finished it, he said. Thought maybe you'd like to learn how I did it. All of you. He looked at each sister in turn. If you want to come home with me. Maya slid off Olivia's lap and took the horse. The other sisters gathered around, looking at the detailed carving. Then Maya launched herself forward, wrapping her arms around James's waist. One by one, the other sisters joined the hug. Over their heads, James met Ms. Thompson's teary smile with one of his own. Better hurry, he said gruffly, his own eyes damp. Don't want to keep the judge waiting. As they walked out to the van that would take them to the courthouse, James felt the weight of what he was about to do. 7 lives in his hands, like pieces of raw wood waiting to be shaped into something beautiful. He didn't know if he could do it, but looking at the sisters supporting each other down the steps, he knew he had to try. The morning sun caught the teardrops on Maya's cheeks as she climbed into the van, clutching her wooden horse. James watched the sisters settle in, already adjusting to make room for each other, and knew that whatever happened next, this was right. This was the beginning of something important. The courthouse hallway echoed with footsteps. James sat on a hard wooden bench, his work-worn hands clasped together, while the 7 sisters huddled nearby. Maya hadn't let go of the wooden horse since they'd left the orphanage. Olivia Santos. A clerk called out. The judge wants to speak with each of you separately. Olivia stood up, smoothing her donated dress. At 16, she carried herself like someone much older, with shoulders squared against the world. She squeezed Maya's shoulder before following the clerk. Inside the judge's chambers, Judge Martinez looked up from a thick file. Sit down, Olivia. Yes. Olivia perched on the edge of the chair, her back straight. You're the oldest, the judge said. Tell me about your sisters. Olivia's hands twisted in her lap. Sophia's 15. She's the smart one, straight A's, wants to be a doctor. Emma's 14. She looks out for everyone, makes sure we eat before she does. Ava's 12. She's quiet but notices everything. Isabella's 11. She makes us laugh even when things are bad. Mia's 10. She's got big dreams, always planning something. And Maya? A smile softened her face. Maya's 8. She's the baby, but she's stronger than she knows. And what do you think about Mr. Wilson? He sees us, Olivia said simply, not just as a group to be dealt with. He remembers what each of us likes. He noticed that Sophia's good at math, that Emma likes to fix things. He caught Maya when she almost fell last week and he didn't even know her name then. But he was there. The judge made a note. You understand this is unusual. A single man, his age, taking in 7 children. With respect, Your Honor, everything about us is unusual. Olivia's voice strengthened. We've been in the system 3 years. Nobody wants 7 kids. They want to split us up, but we're all we have. One by one, the sisters took their turns. Sophia spoke about education, her words careful and measured. Emma talked about helping James fix a cabinet at the community center, her eyes lighting up at the memory. Ava whispered about feeling safe when James was around. Isabella mentioned his patient explanations of woodworking. Mia detailed her plans to help in his workshop. Maya went last, clutching her wooden horse. Do you know why you're here? Judge Martinez asked gently. Mr. Wilson wants to be our dad, Maya said. He makes things whole again when they are broken. The judge's eyes softened. Is that what you want? Maya nodded. He smells like wood and cookies. And he has sad eyes like we do, but they get happy when we're around. When James's turn came, he brought a folder thick with papers, house plans, budget spreadsheets, character references, school registration forms. You've done your homework, Mr. Wilson, Judge Martinez said, reviewing the documents. Had to. Those girls deserve someone who tries their best. This won't be easy. 7 adolescent girls, all with trauma in their backgrounds. You're 65, living on a pension and irregular carpentry work. James leaned forward. I know what it's like to be unwanted. My father died in a construction accident when I was 10. Mother couldn't cope, started drinking. I learned carpentry from a neighbor who gave me a chance when nobody else would. He pulled out a photo. That's my wife, Sarah. We couldn't have children, but she never stopped giving love to every kid in the neighborhood. She'd want this. Mr. Wilson dash. I've got skills, he interrupted. Can't give them luxury, but I can teach them to build, to create. Got a 3-bedroom house with a workshop. Church is helping with supplies. Miss Thompson's got training resources. I may not be young, but I'm strong enough to try. A knock interrupted them. The clerk entered with Ms. Thompson. Your Honor, Ms. Thompson said, I have the final home study report and recommendations. Judge Martinez read the new papers carefully. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. James thought about the girls waiting outside, 7 hearts beating with hope and fear. Bring them in, the judge finally said. The sisters filed in, automatically arranging themselves by height. James stood, and Maya slipped her small hand into his. This is highly unconventional, Judge Martinez began. The system typically prefers younger couples, traditional family units. She looked at each face in turn. However, the system has failed these children for 3 years. Mr. Wilson has demonstrated thorough preparation, community support, and most importantly, a genuine understanding of what these girls need. James felt Maya's hand tighten in his. There will be conditions, the judge continued. Monthly check-ins with Ms. Thompson. Mandatory family counseling. Regular home inspections. You'll need to prove adequate progress in adapting your home within 30 days. Yes, Your Honor, James said hoarsely. Furthermore, this will be a probationary placement for 6 months before permanent adoption can be considered. Do you understand? 7 voices joined James's. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Martinez picked up her pen. Then by the authority vested in me by the state, I hereby grant temporary custody of Olivia, Sophia, Emma, Ava, Isabella, MIA, and Maya Santos to James Wilson, with intent to adopt. The sound of her signature was lost in the sisters' cries of joy. They surrounded James, 7 pairs of arms holding tight. He felt tears on his shirt, heard laughter mixed with sobs. Dad, Maya whispered experimentally. Can we go home now? James looked at these 7 girls, his girls now, and saw his workshop's walls covered in their drawings, heard their laughter mixing with the sound of sawing wood, felt the weight of their dreams added to his own. Yeah, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Let's go home. Outside the courthouse, Pastor Mike waited with his van. The church ladies had spent the morning preparing James's house, making beds, stocking the kitchen. Ms. Thompson would follow with the girls' few belongings from the orphanage. As they loaded into the van, James caught Olivia looking back at the courthouse. You okay? He asked. She nodded, tears tracking down her cheeks. It's real this time, isn't it? We're staying together. James put his arm around her shoulders, feeling her lean into him just slightly. That's a promise, he said. All 7 of you, together. The van pulled away from the courthouse. In the back, Maya was already showing her sisters the detailed carvings on her wooden horse, explaining how James had taught her the names of different tools. Sophia and Emma whispered about workshop projects. Ava and Isabella planned room arrangements. MIA made lists of everything they needed to do. James watched them in the rearview mirror. These 7 pieces of his heart he hadn't known were missing. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was a carpenter. He knew how to take raw materials and build something strong, something lasting, something like family. The key stuck in the front door lock. James jiggled it twice, a habit so ingrained he didn't think about it anymore. Behind him, 7 girls stood on his porch now, with wide eyes and small backpacks containing everything they owned. Home sweet home, he said, pushing the door open. The hinges creaked, another thing he'd been meaning to fix. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and fresh bread. Pastor Mike's wife Helen had clearly been busy. New curtains hung in the windows, bright yellow ones that Sarah would have loved. Kitchen's through there, James pointed. Living room here. Bathroom down that hall. Bedrooms upstairs. Maya darted inside first, her shoes squeaking on the clean floors. The others followed more slowly, taking in every detail. Where will we sleep? Ava asked, her quiet voice careful. Come on, I'll show you. James led them upstairs, his knee protesting each step. The church ladies had worked miracles. The larger bedroom now held 3 bunk beds, each with new sheets and blankets. The smaller room had a single bed and a desk. "Olivia," James said, "thought you might want your own space, being oldest. The desk is for studying." Olivia's hand traced the desk surface. "You made this?" "Last week. Nothing fancy, but it's solid." "Girls!" Miss Thompson called from downstairs. "Your boxes are here." They thundered down the stairs, eager for their belongings. James followed slower, watching them gather around the stack of cardboard boxes in his living room. "Remember the rules we discussed," Ms. Thompson said. "Mr. Wilson, James, is your guardian now. Respect his home and his guidelines." "Yes, Ms. Thompson," they chorused. She hugged each girl, lingering with Maya. "I'll check in next week. Call if you need anything." After she left, James stood awkwardly in his own living room. 7 pairs of eyes looked at him expectantly. "Well," he cleared his throat. "Better unpack, I guess. Then we'll figure out dinner." The next hour was chaos. Girls ran up and down stairs, calling dibs on bunk beds, sorting through shared clothes. James retreated to the kitchen, trying to figure out what to feed 7 growing kids. The refrigerator was stocked. More church help. He pulled out chicken and vegetables, staring at them like they might tell him what to do. "Want help?" He turned to find Emma in the doorway. "You cook?" She shrugged. "Sometimes. At the home. I can cut vegetables." "Have at it." He handed her a knife and cutting board. Soon Sophia joined them, then MIA. They worked quietly. The only sounds the chopping of vegetables and the occasional shout from upstairs. "James!" Maya appeared, holding his toolbox. The closet doors stuck. He followed her upstairs. The other girls had arranged their few belongings. Ava and Isabella shared the bottom bunks, with Sophia and MIA above them. The third bunk was for Emma and Maya. "See?" Maya pushed the closet door. It scraped against the frame. James examined the hinges. "Quick fix. Hand me that screwdriver." Maya watched intently as he adjusted the door. "Can I try?" He showed her how to hold the screwdriver, guiding her small hands. The door swung smoothly after their repairs. "Good job, kiddo." A crash from downstairs made them both jump. "Sorry," Emma's voice called. "Dropped a pan." In the kitchen, they found a pot on the floor and vegetables scattered everywhere. Emma looked close to tears. "It's okay," James said quickly. "No harm done." They all pitched in to clean up. The chicken was a little burnt, the vegetables unevenly cut, but nobody complained. "We need rules," Olivia said during dinner. "Chore assignments, bathroom schedules." James nodded. "Tomorrow we'll work it all out. Tonight, just settle in." After dinner, Isabella and MIA insisted on washing dishes. Ava dried them with careful precision. In the living room, Sophia found James's old TV and figured out how to connect their donated DVD player. "Movie night?" she suggested. They gathered around the TV, squeezing onto the couch and floor. Maya fell asleep halfway through, her head on James's knee. One by one, the others dozed off too. James sat still, listening to 7 different breathing patterns, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. A floorboard creaked. Olivia stood in the hallway. "Can't sleep?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "Too quiet." The home was never quiet. "Come on," he said. "I want to show you something." They walked through the kitchen to his workshop. Tools lined the walls, projects in various stages sat on benches. The air smelled of wood and varnish. "Your sisters seemed interested in learning," James said. "Thought maybe you all might want to help out sometimes." Olivia picked up a small block of pine. "You teach us?" "If you want." He showed her his workbench. "Could be good, having something to build together." "James?" Her voice was hesitant. "What do we call you?" He hadn't thought about that. "Whatever feels right." "James is fine." "Oh, well, whatever you decide." She nodded, still holding the pine block. "Some of the little ones, they might want to call you Dad. Not right away, maybe, but that'd be okay," he said gruffly. "More than okay." A cry from the house interrupted them. They hurried back to find Maya thrashing in her sleep. "Nightmare," Olivia explained. "She gets them sometimes." James knelt by Maya's side. "Hey, sweetheart. You're safe. Wake up now." Maya's eyes flew open. She looked around wildly until she saw James and Olivia. "You're still here," she whispered. Course we are. James smoothed her hair. Not going anywhere. It took an hour to get everyone up to proper beds. James checked each room twice, making sure everyone was settled. In the hallway, he found Ava hanging back. Everything okay? She pointed to a photo on the wall, James and Sarah on their wedding day. Is that your wife? Yeah, Sarah. She died 5 years ago. Did she like kids? Love them. Would have spoiled you all rotten. Ava absorbed this. I'm sorry she's gone. Me too. Kiddo. He touched the frame gently. But I think she'd be happy about this. Finally, the house quieted. James sat in his workshop, listening to the new creaks and shifts of a house full of people. His phone buzzed. A text from Ms. Thompson. How's it going? He typed back. Chaos. Beautiful chaos. Looking around his workshop, he could already imagine 7 different projects taking shape. Maybe a jewelry box for Olivia, a bookshelf for Sophia, a toolbox for Emma. Something special for each of them. The next few days would be hard. School registrations, doctor appointments, shopping for necessities. But tonight, his girls were safe, fed, and together. Tomorrow would be soon enough to face the challenges. Tonight was for letting foundations settle, for learning the sound of 7 sleeping breaths, for feeling the weight of 7 hearts trusting him to make this work. James picked up his tools and began sketching plans for 7 name plaques, each unique, each part of a matching set. Like his girls, individual pieces forming one complete whole. Outside his workshop window, the moon cast shadows on his garden. Sarah's roses needed pruning, the grass needed cutting, the fence needed painting. But for the first time in years, his house felt alive. It felt like home. The inspector's heels clicked against the hardwood floors as she walked through James's house, making notes on her clipboard. 2 weeks had passed since the girls moved in, and the mandatory home inspection had arrived sooner than expected. The electrical system needs updating, she said, pointing to an outlet. And these windows don't meet current safety codes. James followed her, his stomach tightening with each new item she listed. The girls were at school. Their first week had started yesterday. But he could still hear their voices echoing through the house, their laughter, their dreams. The workshop proximity is concerning, the inspector continued, opening the back door. No proper separation between living space and work area. You'll need a safety barrier. How long do I have to fix everything? James asked, already calculating costs in his head. 30 days for critical issues. She handed him a paper filled with red marks. 60 for the rest. After she left, James sat at his workbench, spreading out the inspection report next to his bank statements. The numbers didn't add up. His pension barely covered food and utilities for 8 people. The church's help was generous but temporary. The back door creaked open. Mr. Wilson. It was Sophia. School must have ended. We got our supply list today. She held out several sheets of paper. Textbooks, notebooks, calculators, uniforms. The list seemed endless. 7 sets of everything. Let me see what I can figure out, he said, taking the papers. Sophia lingered, watching him work on a dresser he was building for the girls' room. Can I help? Know how to sand? She shook her head. Come here. He showed her how to hold the sanding block, guiding her hands in smooth strokes along the wood grain. Not too hard. Let the sandpaper do the work. They worked in comfortable silence until Emma joined them, then Maya. Soon all 7 girls were in the workshop, finding tasks they could handle. Look. Maya held up a small piece of which she'd been sanding. It's smooth. A loud knock interrupted their work session. James opened the door to find Mrs. Henderson from next door, her face pinched with disapproval. The noise, she said without preamble. It's constant. All hours. Children running, hammering, sawing. We'll try to keep it down, James promised. 7 children. She continued as if he hadn't spoken. In this quiet neighborhood. It's not appropriate. Behind him, he heard the workshop go silent. They are my daughters, he said firmly. And they are not going anywhere. Mrs. Henderson's lips thinned. We'll see about that. She turned sharply and walked away. James closed the door, his hands shaking slightly. When he returned to the workshop, he found the girls huddled together, Olivia's arms around Maya's shoulders. Are we in trouble? MIA asked. No, James said quickly. Just need to be a bit quieter. That's all. But the mood had shifted. The girls worked silently now, stealing glances at him when they thought he wasn't looking. That evening, while helping Ava with homework at the kitchen table, James's phone rang. The school principal. Mr. Wilson, we need to discuss the girls' placement tests. Their education has been inconsistent. More problems, more costs. Tutoring, maybe. Extra books. Time they didn't have. Money he couldn't spare. A crash from the living room made him jump. He found Isabella standing over a broken lamp, Sarah's favorite. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears starting. I was just trying to dust it. It's okay, James said automatically, but his voice came out rough. He knelt to pick up the pieces, cutting his finger on a sharp edge. You're bleeding. Maya appeared with a first aid kit. When had she learned where they kept that? Just a scratch. But his hands were shaking as he tried to open a bandage. Let me, Emma said, taking the bandage from him. Her fingers were steady as she wrapped his cut. That night, after the girls were asleep, James sat in his workshop counting pennies. The inspection repairs would take most of his savings. School supplies would drain the rest. And the house still needed so much work. A floorboard creaked behind him. He turned to find Sophia and Emma in the doorway. We want to help, Sophia said. With the workshop. Girls dash. We can learn, Emma interrupted. Make things to sell, maybe. Like those jewelry boxes you make. James looked at their determined faces. It's not your responsibility. We're family now, Sophia said simply. Family helps. The next morning, James woke to find a notice taped to his front door. Anonymous complaint filed with the housing authority. Safety concerns about children living next to a working workshop. His heart pounded as he ripped down the paper. Inside, he could hear the girls getting ready for school. Olivia helping Maya with her hair. Isabella and Mia arguing over breakfast cereal. Ava quietly setting the table. Sophia and Emma discussing their plans to help in the workshop. 7 lives depending on him. 7 hearts he couldn't bear to disappoint. The inspection report sat heavy on his desk. School supply lists pinned to the refrigerator. Bills piling up. And now this complaint. James walked to his workshop, breathing in the familiar scent of wood and varnish. On his workbench lay 7 half-finished name plaques, each carved with care and love. He picked up his tools and began to work. The rhythmic sound of sanding filled the morning air, drowning out Mrs. Henderson's disapproving stare through her window. The weight of the inspection report, the fear of failure. When the girls came home that afternoon, he had a plan. Family meeting, he announced at dinner. We're going to fix this place up together. Make it right and proper. Show them all what we can do. Like what? Maya asked around a mouthful of spaghetti. Well, James smiled. First, we're going to build a proper fence between the workshop and the house. And you're all going to help. 7 faces lit up with determination. 7 pairs of hands ready to build something together. They might not have much, but they had this, sawdust in their hair, calluses forming on young hands, love growing stronger with each nail hammered, each board sanded, each problem faced together. Mrs. Henderson might complain about the noise, but she couldn't hear what James heard. The sound of family being built, one piece at a time, solid and true as the wood they worked with. Later that night, cleaning up the workshop, James found Maya's wooden horse sitting on his workbench. She'd added her own careful attempt at carving 7 small stars along the base. 1 for each of them. Together. No matter what came next. The saw slipped. James had been working since dawn, trying to finish the safety barrier between the house and workshop before the inspector's follow-up visit. His hands were tired. He'd ignored the trembling in his muscles, the way his vision blurred at the edges. The blade caught his right hand, just below the thumb. Dad! Olivia's scream pierced the morning air. She'd come to call him for breakfast. Blood dripped onto sawdust. James stared at his hand, strangely distant from the pain. Emma! Olivia shouted. Call 911. The workshop filled with panicked voices. Sophia pressing a clean towel against the wound. Maya crying. Mia running for the first aid kit. Ava and Isabella frozen in the doorway. It's not that bad, James tried to say, but his voice came out weak. The ambulance arrived in minutes. Paramedics wrapped his hand. Asked questions he answered through a fog of pain and worry. Sir, we need to take you to the hospital, one said. This requires stitches. James looked at his girls. 7 scared faces. They can't stay alone. I called Ms. Thompson, Olivia said. She's on her way. The ride to the hospital passed in a blur of sirens and worried voices. They kept him for hours, stitches, tetanus shot, questions about his age and living situation. 7 children. The doctor frowned at his chart. At your age, working with power tools. They are my daughters, James said automatically, the words slurring slightly from pain medication. By the time Miss Thompson brought him home, it was dark. His right hand was heavily bandaged, useless. The house smelled like burnt pasta. Dishes clattered in the kitchen. We tried to make dinner, Emma said, guilt in her voice. It didn't turn out great. James found his girls gathered around the kitchen table, a pot of overcooked spaghetti between them. They'd been crying, he could tell from their red eyes. The inspector comes tomorrow, Olivia said quietly. We're not ready. James sank into a chair, the pain medication making the room spin slightly. The barrier wasn't finished. Half the repairs still needed doing, and now he couldn't work. Maybe. His voice cracked. Maybe this was a mistake. Silence fell like a hammer blow. What do you mean? Maya's small voice trembled. I can't give you what you need. Can't even keep a proper home dash, no. Sophia stood up so suddenly her chair fell backward. You don't get to give up on us. Sophia dash. We've had people give up on us before, she continued, tears streaming down her face. Parents who didn't want us. Foster homes that sent us back. But not you. You promised. The other girls watched, barely breathing. I can't work. James gestured with his bandaged hand. Can't finish the repairs. Can't provide dash. We'll help, Emma interrupted. We've been learning. Sophia and I can handle the basic repairs. And I can cook, MIA added. I'll learn better recipes. I'll clean, Ava said quietly. I'll help with the little ones, Isabella offered. I can do my homework by myself, Maya said proudly. Olivia stood next to Sophia. We're not letting you quit, Dad. We're family now. James looked at them, really looked. They weren't the same scared girls who'd arrived a month ago. They stood taller, spoke with more confidence. They had sawdust under their fingernails and determination in their eyes. Miss Thompson cleared her throat from the doorway. The inspection tomorrow. We'll handle it, Olivia said firmly. All of us. They worked through the night. Sophia and Emma finished the safety barrier, following James's careful instructions. Olivia organized paperwork. The younger ones cleaned every surface they could reach. Past midnight, James found Maya asleep on the workshop floor, clutching her wooden horse. He couldn't pick her up with his injured hand. I've got her, Olivia said, lifting her little sister gently. When the inspector arrived the next morning, she found 7 girls lined up beside their father's wheelchair. The doctor had insisted he stay off his feet for a few days. The barrier is complete, Sophia reported professionally. All exposed wires have been covered. Windows have safety latches. The inspector raised her eyebrows but followed as they led her through the house. Each girl presented the improvements in their area of responsibility. In the workshop, she asked. Emma stepped forward. We've implemented all required safety measures. Would you like to see the documentation? James watched, his heart so full it hurt, as his daughters demonstrated everything they'd learned. They spoke with confidence about tool safety, proper storage, emergency procedures. The inspector made notes, her face unreadable. Finally, she looked at James. This isn't conventional, she said, but I can see real effort here. Provisional pass, pending final review next month. After she left, the girls collapsed onto the couch, exhausted but grinning. We did it, Maya said sleepily. You sure did, sweetheart. James's voice was rough with emotion. That afternoon, while James rested in his chair, the girls gathered in the workshop. He could hear them talking, planning. We need money, Olivia was saying. Dad's hand will take weeks to heal. The jewelry boxes, Sophia suggested. We've watched him make them. Maybe we could. The church has that craft fair next month, Emma added. James closed his eyes, listening to his daughter's problem solve. He thought he was supposed to be the one teaching them, but here they were, teaching him about strength and family and never giving up. His hand throbbed, reminding him of his limitations. But when he opened his eyes, he found Maya sitting beside his chair. Does it hurt bad? She asked. Just a bit. She placed her wooden horse in his good hand. You can borrow him. He helps with bad dreams. James clutched the small carving, feeling the 7 stars Maya had added to its base. Thank you, sweetheart. That night, He heard them in their rooms, whispered plans, quiet giggles, the sounds of home. His injury had terrified them, but instead of breaking, they'd grown stronger. They were building something here, all of them together. Not just a home that passed inspections, but a family that could weather any storm. Even with his bandaged hand, James picked up a pencil and began sketching new project plans. Simpler designs that the girls could manage. Ways to teach them without power tools until he healed. They wouldn't let him give up, so he wouldn't. They were Wilson's now, all of them. And Wilson's built things to last. "Don't come in here," Sophia's voice called out when James approached the workshop door one Saturday morning. His hand was still bandaged, but the pain had subsided to a dull throb. "It's my workshop," he reminded her, amused. "Not today, it's not," Emma added from inside. He heard shuffling, the sound of papers being moved, whispered consultations. 3 weeks had passed since the accident. 3 weeks of the girls taking over household duties, of neighbors bringing casseroles, of learning to write with his left hand. 3 weeks of mysterious sounds from his workshop after school. "At least tell me you're being careful," he said through the door. "Safety goggles on." Maya's voice piped up. "And no power tools. We promise." James retreated to the house, shaking his head. Through the kitchen window, he watched his daughters slip in and out of the workshop all day, carrying supplies, measuring twice, consulting his old woodworking books. Olivia found him there later, staring at his bandaged hand. "2 more weeks until the stitches come out," she said, setting a cup of coffee beside him. "Doctor said you're healing well. You girls have taken on too much. We've taken on exactly what family does." She hesitated. "Do you want to see what we've been working on?" James followed her to the workshop. Inside, his daughters stood around his old workbench, now covered with a sheet. "Ready?" Sophia asked the others. They nodded. Emma pulled off the sheet. On the bench sat 7 wooden boxes, each slightly different but clearly made by inexperienced hands. The joints weren't perfect, the finishes weren't smooth, but they were solid. "We've been practicing," Sophia explained, "following your old project notebooks. And look," Maya pulled out a piece of paper covered in calculations. "We figured out how much would we need and how much we can sell them for at the church fair." James picked up one of the boxes. He could see where they'd struggled with the corners, how they'd problem-solved their way through difficulties. His throat tightened. "This is good work," he managed. "We're not as good as you," Emma said quickly. "But Mrs. Peterson from church already ordered 2 for her grandkids. And Mr. Johnson wants 1 for his wife's birthday. How long have you been planning this?" "Since your accident," Olivia admitted. "We needed a way to help with expenses. The church fair is in 2 weeks, and we thought, show him the special one," Ava urged. Mia brought out another box from under the workbench. This one was larger, more intricate. 7 different types of wood had been carefully pieced together. "It's for you," Isabella said. "We each did a different part." James opened it carefully. Inside, each girl had carved her name on a separate panel. In the center, Maya had carved a tiny horse. "We messed up a lot at first," Sophia said, showing him a pile of practice pieces. "But we kept trying, like you taught us," Nema added. James walked around the workshop, seeing it through new eyes. They'd organized his tools by size and function, labeled everything clearly, created a safety checklist by the door. His old project notebooks were dog-eared and bookmarked. "Mr. Johnson offered to teach us more techniques," Sophia said. "Since you can't right now. He said he owes you for fixing his porch last year. And Pastor Mike said we could have a proper table at the fair," Mia added excitedly. "Not just a card table like the kids usually get. We thought." Emma hesitated. "Maybe we could call it Wilson and Daughter's Workshop for the fair? Only if you want." James had to turn away for a moment, his eyes burning. When he could speak again, his voice was rough. "You girls really want to learn this trade?" "Not all of us," Olivia said honestly. "But we all want to help. And some of us," she looked at Sophia and Emma, "some of us really love it." Maya tugged at his good hand. "Come see what else we made." They showed him their other projects, simple coasters, basic picture frames, even a wobbly but functional footstool. Each piece showed hours of patient work, determination overcoming inexperience. "The church ladies have been helping too," Isabella explained. "Mrs. Baker taught us about sanding properly, and Mr. Peterson showed us how to use the hand plane safely. They all say they are repaying your kindness," Ava said quietly. All the things you've fixed for them over the years. James sat in his old chair, overwhelmed. The workshop had always been his sanctuary, his private space. Now it hummed with new energy, 7 different personalities leaving their mark. Dad! Maya crawled into his lap, careful of his injured hand. Are you mad we used your workshop? No, sweetheart. Not mad at all. Then why are you crying? He hadn't realized he was. Because sometimes hearts get so full they overflow. The other girls gathered around him. He looked at their hands, small nicks and scratches from learning, sawdust under their nails, calluses forming on soft skin. We need to work on your technique, he said finally. Those joints could be tighter, and your sanding needs to be more even. 6 grins and 1 squeal of delight answered him. Does that mean we can keep using the workshop? Emma asked. Under supervision, he qualified. And only hand tools until I'm healed enough to teach you proper power tool safety. And we can sell at the fair. Wilson and Daughter's workshop, he tested the name. Has a nice ring to it. They spent the rest of the day planning. Sophia showed him their cost calculations. Emma demonstrated their improved sanding technique. The younger ones proudly displayed their organizational system for scrap wood. That evening, James sat in the workshop long after the girls had gone to bed. He picked up the box they'd made him, tracing each carved name with his good hand. 7 different pieces of wood, carefully joined together. 7 different hands learning to create. 7 hearts building something new from the raw materials of love and trust and family. The workshop had been his escape after Sarah died, a place to lose himself in the rhythm of working wood. Now it was transforming into something else, a place of learning, of growth, of family legacy. Through the window, he could see Mrs. Henderson watching from next door. Let her watch. Let her see what a real family could build together. His hand might be injured, but his heart was healing stronger than ever. Wilson and Daughter's workshop. Some pieces of wood, like some pieces of life, came together to make something more beautiful than anyone could have planned. The church parking lot buzzed with activity as vendors set up their stalls for the summer craft fair. James watched from the Wilson and Daughter's workshop booth as his girls arranged their pieces on the display table Pastor Mike had loaned them. Prices need to be visible, Olivia directed, adjusting the handwritten signs. Sophia, those jewelry boxes should be front and center. His hand was healing well. The stitches were out, though the doctor warned him to take it slow. He flexed his fingers, feeling the pull of new scar tissue. Dad! Emma called. Where do you want the business cards? The cards were simple, printed at the library on heavy stock paper. Wilson and Daughter's workshop, in clean letters, with their phone number and a small drawing of Maya's wooden horse. By the register, he said. The register was a lockbox Mia had decorated with woodburn designs. She'd practiced for days on scrap wood until she got it right. Maya darted between tables, wearing the workshop apron Isabella had modified to fit her. All 7 girls wore them, dark blue canvas with their names embroidered by Mrs. Baker from church. First customer, Maya announced as a woman approached their booth. James started to step forward, but Sophia beat him to it. Welcome to Wilson and Daughter's workshop, she said confidently. Everything here is handcrafted by our family. He watched as Sophia explained their process to the customer, demonstrating the smooth sliding drawer on a jewelry box, pointing out the different woods used in each piece. Your daughter has quite the eye for detail, the woman said to James as she paid for the box. Yes, he agreed proudly. She does. The morning flew by. Each girl found her rhythm. Olivia handled the money and paperwork. Sophia and Emma talked technical details with customers. Ava quietly restocked the display as pieces sold. Isabella and Mia demonstrated their smaller projects, coasters, picture frames, decorative boxes. Maya charmed everyone with stories about learning to carve. Mr. Wilson. He turned to find Mrs. Henderson from next door. She stood awkwardly, clutching her purse. Been watching you all, she said. Through my window. These past months. James waited. I was wrong, she said finally. About the noise. About all of it. She picked up a small box. My granddaughter would love this. After she left, Olivia appeared at his side. Did Mrs. Henderson just buy something? Miracles happen. The afternoon brought more customers. Word spread about the family business. People asked questions, not just about the products, but about the girls, about their story. We're learning from Dad, Maya told everyone proudly. He's teaching us everything he knows. During a quiet moment, James found Emma studying their sales list. We made enough to cover next month's utilities, she said. And the school supplies we still need. That's not for you to worry about. Family business, she reminded him. We all do our part. A commotion at the front of their booth drew their attention. A man in an expensive suit was examining one of Sophia's jewelry boxes. The craftsmanship is impressive, he said. I own a gift shop downtown. We might be interested in carrying some pieces. James watched Sophia's eyes light up. Then her face grew serious as she discussed production capabilities, pricing structures, delivery schedules. When had his daughter learned to talk business? We'll need to expand, Emma said later as they packed up. Maybe convert part of the garage. One step at a time, James cautioned. But that evening, after counting their earnings at the kitchen table, they couldn't help planning. MIA had a notebook full of design ideas. Ava had organized a production schedule. Isabella had sketched improvements for their workshop layout. We should open a savings account, Olivia suggested. For business expenses. And college, James added firmly. They looked at him in surprise. This is wonderful, he said, gesturing to their planning notes. I'm proud of all of you. But school comes first. What if we want to do this? Sophia asked. As a career. Then you'll go to business school, learn proper accounting, marketing. He smiled at their determined faces. We'll build something lasting here. But we'll do it right. That night, unable to sleep, James walked to his workshop. Their workshop now. 7 aprons hung by the door. Tools were arranged in holders labeled with each girl's name. The walls held their practice pieces, showing their progress. He found Maya's latest carving attempt on his workbench, a small family of horses, 8 in total. The details were rough, the proportions uneven, but the love in every cut was clear. Can't sleep? Olivia stood in the doorway. Just thinking, he said. She came in, running her hand along the workbench. About Mom. Sarah would have loved this. All of you. Tell me about her. James picked up Maya's carving. She believed in making things beautiful. Not just objects, but moments, relationships. She'd have taught you girls so much. She did, Olivia said softly. Through you. The next morning, they gathered for their new Sunday tradition, workshop planning meeting over breakfast. 7 notebooks open, 7 voices contributing ideas. The gift shop owner called, Sophia reported. He wants to start with a small order. Test the market. We'll need more hands, Emma said. Mr. Johnson offered to mentor us, MIA added. Said he's got time since retiring. And Mrs. Baker knows other stores that might be interested, Isabella chimed in. One step at a time, James reminded them. But he couldn't help smiling at their enthusiasm. They spent the afternoon in the workshop, 7 pairs of hands working together. Sophia and Emma taught the younger ones basic techniques. Olivia updated their inventory spreadsheet. James supervised, offering guidance when needed. Maya brought him a small piece of wood. Can you teach me to carve letters? For the nameplates on our stuff. He showed her how to hold the chisel safely, guiding her hands like he had that first day with the wooden horse. She concentrated fiercely, tongue sticking out as she carved her first wobbly W. Look! She held up her work proudly. Wilson. Perfect, he said, and meant it. Through the window, he could see their display pieces from the fair arranged proudly on shelves. Each item told a story, of learning, of trying, of family coming together. Wilson and Daughter's workshop was more than a business. It was their story, carved in wooden love, built by 8 pairs of hands working as one. The future would bring challenges, changes, growth. But they would face it together, building something stronger than any one of them could create alone. That was what family meant. That was what Wilsons did. They built things to last. One year, James stood in the doorway of his workshop, their workshop, early on a Saturday morning. Morning light caught the dust motes dancing in the air, illuminating the changes 12 months had brought. 7 workstations lined the walls now, each personalized. Olivia's space held business ledgers alongside her tools. Sophia's area displayed technical drawings and wood samples. Emma's station had a collection of specialized carving tools. The younger girls shared a long bench, their projects in various stages of completion. His phone buzzed, a reminder. Ms. Thompson would arrive in an hour for their final review before the adoption hearing next week. Dad! Maya's voice called from the house. Breakfast is ready. The kitchen had changed too. A longer table, built by all of them together. 8 chairs, each carved with its owner's name. The walls held framed photos of their first year as a family. The craft fair, workshop sessions, holiday celebrations. His girls sat around the table, passing plates of slightly burnt toast and scrambled eggs. Olivia checked their schedule on her tablet while helping Maya cut her pancakes. Sophia and Emma discussed a new design for their gift shop line. Ava quietly arranged everyone's juice glasses. Isabella and Mia argued over who would clean the workshop floors. Ms. Thompson called, Olivia announced. She's bringing someone from the adoption agency with her. James saw Seven back stiffen slightly. Hey, he said firmly. Nothing to worry about. We got this. They practiced for this visit. The workshop safety protocols were second nature now. The house ran like clockwork, each girl knowing her responsibilities. Even their grades had improved. Sophia was top of her class, and the others weren't far behind. Still, he understood their anxiety. 1 year ago, they'd been 7 scared girls facing separation. The memory of almost losing each other didn't fade easily. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 o'clock. Wilson and Daughter's workshop. Maya greeted proudly as James opened the door. She'd appointed herself official family spokesperson. Ms. Thompson smiled. Hello, Maya. She gestured to her companion. This is Mrs. Chen from the adoption agency. They toured the house first. Mrs. Chen noted the organizational systems, the study schedules posted on bedroom walls, the family calendar in the kitchen. And the workshop, she asked. James watched his daughters transform into professional craftswomen. They demonstrated safety procedures, explained their quality control process, showed their business records. Each piece is inspected twice, Sophia explained, demonstrating their checklist system. We track all expenses and income, Olivia added, opening their ledger. The business account is separate from household funds. And school? Mrs. Chen asked. Emma pulled out their latest report cards. All A's and B's, with glowing teacher comments. We study first, Mia said seriously. Workshop time is for after homework. They saved the best for last, their new project gallery. Custom pieces lined the walls, each tag with its creator's name and the skills demonstrated. This is impressive, Mrs. Chen admitted, examining a particularly intricate jewelry box. Who made this one? That's Sophia's work, James said proudly. She's got a natural talent for detail. And this? She pointed to a carved scene of horses running. Maya's been practicing, Emma explained. We all helped teach her. Mrs. Chen made notes on her tablet. Your family business is doing well. We have contracts with 3 local shops now, Olivia reported. And a waiting list for custom orders. The income helps, James added. But that's not why we do it. Oh! Show her, Maya, Sophia encouraged. Maya ran to her workstation and returned with a small wooden plaque. The carving was simple but clear, 8 interlocked circles, each containing a family member's initial. We're linked, Maya explained. Like a chain. One piece makes the whole thing stronger. Mrs. Chen's professional facade softened slightly. After the officials left, the family gathered in the workshop. James watched his daughters gravitate to their stations, picking up projects they'd been working on. Think we passed? Ava asked quietly. With flying colors, James assured her. They worked together through the afternoon. The sound of sanding and carving filled the air, punctuated by questions, suggestions, and occasional laughter. Remember when Emma dropped that first jewelry box? Isabella teased. Remember when Maya used Dad's best chisel as a paint stirrer? Sophia countered. Remember when Olivia tried to organize us by height for the craft fair? Mia laughed. Remember our first family dinner? James asked softly. They all looked at the burn mark on the kitchen ceiling, visible through the workshop door. We've come a long way, Olivia said. James watched Maya carefully carving letters under Emma's guidance. Watched Sophia showing Ava how to match wood grains. Watched Isabella and Mia collaborate on a new design. Watched Olivia update their business records with steady hands. A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Henderson stood there with a plate of cookies. Thought you might need a snack, she said. Big week coming up. The adoption hearing. The final step. Thanks, Mrs. H., Maya said, taking the plate. Their former nemesis was now one of their biggest supporters. That evening, they gathered in the living room. The wall above the fireplace held their first family portrait, taken 6 months ago. 8 people covered in sawdust, grinning at the camera. "I have something for each of you," James said. He'd been working on the projects in secret, late at night after they were asleep. 8 wooden boxes, each unique. "Open them together," he instructed. Inside each box lay a key, handmade from wood. "To the workshop," he explained. "You've earned them." Maya launched herself into his arms, the others followed, creating a group hug that nearly knocked him over. Later, after the younger ones were in bed, he found Olivia in the workshop, running her fingers over her key. "What if something goes wrong?" she whispered. "At the hearing, nothing will go wrong," he promised. "We're already a family. The hearing just makes it official." She nodded, but her fingers kept tracing the key. "Your mother would be so proud of you," he said. "All of you? Really? She always wanted a big family. Said it would fill the house with love." He looked around their workshop. She was right. Through the window, they could see their reflection in the glass, father and daughter, surrounded by the things they'd built together. Not just furniture and crafts, but trust, love, family. 1 year. From 7 scared girls and 1 uncertain man to a family business. A home full of laughter. A future built on love and hard work. The adoption hearing was just a formality. They'd become a family long ago, with every piece they created together, every problem they solved, every moment they chose to keep building something stronger than their fears. James touched the scar on his hand, a reminder of their darkest moment, when he'd almost given up. His daughters hadn't let him. They'd shown him that family meant building something together, no matter how many times you had to start over. Tomorrow they'd work on new projects. Next week they'd face the judge. Life would keep bringing challenges. But tonight, 8 wooden keys hung on their workshop wall, catching the last light of day. 8 hearts beat in time with the rhythm of their shared dreams, one family, built to last. The courthouse looked different this time. Maya held James's hand as they climbed the steps, her other arm clutching a wooden box she refused to let anyone see. "You sure you want to do this, sweetheart?" James asked. She nodded, her braids bouncing. No yellow ribbons today. She wore the blue ones Isabella had made to match their workshop aprons. The other girls surrounded them, a protective circle. All in their best clothes, all carrying similar boxes. James's heart swelled looking at them. How far they'd come from that first terrified courthouse visit. Judge Martinez was waiting in her chambers. She'd specifically requested to handle their final adoption hearing herself. "The Wilson family," she said warmly. Then, noticing their boxes. "What's all this?" "We asked to speak before the decision," Olivia explained. "To show you something." The judge gestured for them to continue. Maya stepped forward first, her small hand steady as she placed her box on the judge's desk. "I made this," she said clearly. "By myself. Mostly. Emma helped with the hard parts." Judge Martinez opened the box carefully. Inside lay a perfectly carved wooden gavel, small but detailed. "See the stars?" Maya pointed to 7 small stars carved into the handle. "One for each of us. And the big one in the middle is Dad." The judge picked up the gavel, examining the careful workmanship. "This is beautiful, Maya. I was scared when I started," Maya continued. "But Dad says being scared doesn't matter if you're doing something important." One by one, the other girls presented their boxes. Sophia's contained a delicately crafted scale of justice. "Because you balanced what we needed with what was right." Emma's held an intricately carved courthouse facade. "Because this is where our family started." Ava's box revealed a set of wooden dominoes, each carved with a different family scene. "Because one piece affects all the others." Isabella's contained a picture frame decorated with intertwined trees. "Because families have roots and branches." Mia's held a miniature workshop bench. "Because this is where we learn to build together." Olivia went last. Her box was larger, more elaborate. Inside was a family tree, each branch bearing a carefully carved name, all 8 Wilsons, with an empty space at the top. "For Mom," she explained softly. "Dad's wife. She's part of our story too." James hadn't known about their projects. He stood speechless, watching his daughters present the physical proof of their transformation, not just in craftsmanship, but in confidence, in love, in family. "Your Honor," Maya spoke up again. "Can I tell you a story?" The judge nodded, wiping her eyes. Once there were 7 sisters who thought nobody wanted them, and a dad who was all alone, and they were all broken in different ways. Maya touched her wooden gavel. But Dad says broken things can be fixed if you know how to put the pieces together right. She looked at her sisters, gathering courage. He taught us how to sand rough edges smooth, how to join pieces so they are stronger together, how to see the good stuff inside plain wood. Her voice grew stronger, but mostly he taught us that family is something you build, like a really good table that can hold anything. James felt Olivia slip her hand into his. We're not perfect, Maya continued. Sometimes we argue. Sometimes we mess up projects. Isabella still burns dinner sometimes. Hey! Isabella protested, but she was smiling. But we're strong now, Maya finished. Like a good piece of oak. And we want to stay together forever. Please. Judge Martinez cleared her throat. I've been doing this job for 20 years, she said. I've never seen a family presentation quite like this. She stood up, walking around her desk to kneel in front of Maya. May I keep this gavel, she asked, to remind me what families can build together. Maya nodded solemnly. The judge returned to her seat, pulling out official papers. I see no reason to delay. By the power vested in me by the state, I hereby confirm the adoption of Olivia, Sophia, Emma, Ava, Isabella, MIA, and Maya by James Wilson. She smiled. You are now, legally and forever, the Wilson family. Maya threw herself into James's arms. The other girls followed, creating a crying, laughing huddle in the middle of the judge's chambers. One more thing, Judge Martinez said. She pulled out her old gavel and handed it to Maya. Trade you. Outside the courthouse, they gathered on the same steps where their journey had begun. Pastor Mike waited with his van to drive them to the celebration at church. Wilson family, Olivia said experimentally, has a nice ring to it. Always did, James replied. They had one more stop to make. The workshop's grand opening was scheduled for that afternoon, a proper storefront in town, with living quarters upstairs for their growing business. The shop windows displayed their best pieces. The sign above read Wilson and Daughters Workshop in hand-carved letters. Inside, each daughter had her own display area, showing her specialty. Olivia's business corner, with accounting books and order forms neatly arranged. Sophia's custom design station, with samples and sketches. Emma's restoration area, where she'd learned to fix broken things like James had taught her. Spaces for the younger ones to grow into their talents. And in the center, a family project, a massive dining table, each piece selected and shaped by all of them together. The first of many commissioned pieces for their new business. Ready? James asked, holding up the key. 7 hands joined his on the key. They turned it together, opening the door to their future. The workshop filled with sunlight, catching the dust motes that danced in the air like golden promises. Tools waited in their labeled spots. Half-finished projects sat ready to be completed. Order forms waited to be filled. Maya ran to her small workbench, a perfect miniature of James's, and picked up her latest project. A wooden sign she'd carved herself. Welcome to Wilson and Daughters Workshop, where family is built to last. James watched his daughters move around their new space, each finding her place, each belonging perfectly. He thought of Sarah, of that empty house that had echoed with silence, of 7 scared girls who needed a home. Sometimes life gave you raw materials you didn't expect. Rough pieces that didn't seem to fit. But with patience, with love, with willing hands and open hearts, you could build something beautiful. Something strong. Something that would last. Maya appeared at his side, slipping her small hand into his. Dad, can we start working now? James looked at his family, his daughters, his legacy, his heart carved into 7 pieces that made him whole. Yeah, sweetheart, he said. Let's build something together. And they did.